Okay, everybody, it's time to get started. So we do have a few new faces here tonight, and first I'd just say if you see some new faces, take a minute after Pastor. Is it humming on me? Hey, Bo, would you mind turning the main down? Thank you, Nate. So, yeah, that's good. That's better. So what I wanted to say, just kind of give a little bit of an overview of Pastor's Bible studies so that we don't feel lost. We're going to go through a process of observing the text, so we'll just read the text and make some observations about it. And this is where we have full participation. Everyone gets a chance to just shout out what it is that you're noticing. And then as we go through those observations, then we'll take a moment to interpret what that means. Why is it that the author has given us this text? Maybe, Robin, you should go handle it's really a lot of feedback, which might just need, I have no idea. Choir mic? Yeah, it could be monitors. Okay, so we're in 1 Samuel chapter 11. 1 Samuel 11. And here's what I'm going to do tonight. We're going to skip. Did you turn them all the way off? Oh. Okay, we're going to skip. We're going to read chapter 11, but I'm going to move us through it quickly, okay? And then we're really going to dig into chapter 12. Okay? So, let's begin to read chapter 11 and then we'll let me walk through it with you. Nahash the Ammonite went up and besieged Jabesh Gilead, and all the men of Jabesh said to him, "Make a treaty with us, and we will be subject to you." But Nahash the Ammonite replied, "I will make a treaty with you only on the condition that I gouge out the right eye of every one of you, and so bring disgrace on all Israel." Everybody look at Dan's face. This is terrible. It's terrible. The elders of Jabesh said to him, "Give us 7 days so we can send messengers throughout Israel. If no one comes to rescue us, we will surrender to you." When the messengers came to Gibeah of Saul and reported these terms to the people, they all wept aloud. Just then Saul was returning from the fields behind his oxen, and he asked, "What is wrong with the people? Why are they weeping?" Then they repeated to him what the men of Jabesh had said. When Saul heard their words, the Spirit of God came upon him in power, and he burned with anger. He took a pair of oxen, cut them into pieces, and sent the pieces by messengers throughout Israel, proclaiming, "This is what will be done to the oxen of anyone who does not follow Saul and Samuel." Then the terror of the Lord fell upon the people, and they turned out as one man. When Saul mustered them at Bezek, the men of Israel numbered 300,000, and the men of Judah 30,000. They told the messengers who had come, "Say to the men of Jabesh Gilead, by the time the sun is hot tomorrow, you will be delivered." When the messengers went and reported this to the men of Jabesh, they were elated. They said to the Ammonites, "Tomorrow we will surrender to you, and you can do to us whatever seems good to you." The next day, Saul separated his men into 3 divisions. During the last watch of the night, they broke into the camp of the Ammonites and slaughtered them until the heat of the day. Those who survived were scattered so that no 2 of them were left together. Okay, let's just stop there for a minute. Let's do a very brief overview, observations. What is it that stands out to you in this passage? Nellie? Yes. Yeah, so what are the numbers that yours give? Israel has how many? And yours says that Judah had 70? Okay. That could simply be, in fact, I think I'll probably have, no, I don't have a note on that, but That could simply be interpretation of a number. In Hebrew, numbers are not given as numbers. Numbers are given as letters, Hebrew letters, and they add up to numbers. Okay? So there could be some interpretation of what those are. It could be also different manuscripts have different numbers. Yeah. What else, David?
The ancient world was not a cheerful place.
Okay. That's a huge interpretation, but we'll go with it. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, yes, we're moving through quickly. It's very uncomfortable what's happening here. It's violent, yes. Ruth? Don't mess with my oxen. Yeah, yeah. Nate? Okay. Say more about that. Yes. Yeah, this is this like, you may do to me whatever is good to you. It's a very common saying. It's sort of a quick way to tell a story also. And in essence, they're saying like, we have no control over this situation. You're the dominant party here. Okay, so real briefly, here's what's happening. Remember where we came from last week. Saul has been anointed as king, first king of all of Israel. Okay, Saul's been anointed. And now what's happening is that the Ammonites, it's not described to us this way. This is what we're interpreting just based off of reality. The Ammonites are testing him. Oh, Israel has a new king. They've never had one before. We'll show them what it's like to have a king. And the Ammonites, who have a lot of strength and power, they take over Jabesh Gilead. And you hear their violent rhetoric. We're going to come in and besiege you, and they say, make a treaty with us. We'll be subject to you. And their response is, yeah, we'll make a treaty with you. But if we make the treaty, it's not just that you're going to be subject to us, you're going to be shamed in this process. Everyone will know that you are not one of us, and everyone will know that you were dominated by us. That's the power game. That's the reality of the world. We want to think it's different now. It just happens in more diplomatic ways. You know? So, in essence, what they're saying is, how much of this cookie can we bite before the owner starts to notice? And how much will they respond? Or can we just steal the cookie all outright? And so Saul now has to step into his role as king. He hears the weeping of the people. He asks what's going on. He hears what's happening. And you hear two things. He burns with anger, and he's filled with the Spirit of God. And those two things combined create all of the motivation and everything he needs to be able to respond both with wisdom and with speed. So, the rest of the people respond because what does he do? He sends a message out to the people, but it's not just a piece of paper with the wax thing that he stamps, you know. Wouldn't you hate to be the deliverer, the mailman of these pieces of oxen? How quickly do you think it takes for those pieces to begin to smell? Not long. But the point is, that, you know, this isn't the only time that pieces of carcass are sent out to send a message. It gets really dark in some places. But the point is, what's happening here is that Saul is lighting a fire under his people. He's mustering them up. The first time I ever heard the word muster was when A&M, you guys do that weird thing called muster. No, it's actually an honorable thing. They actually honor all of those who have fallen. But in that, I had no idea what that was until I realized, mustering is when you're actually calling up the army. So he calls up the army, and we're given a number. Notice that the kingdom is split already, Israel and Judah. That's north and south. Israel's north, Judah's south. The kingdom is not divided, but they see the territory differently already. And we're just in the beginning of Samuel. All of those the army gathers, and he takes them into battle, and they defeat the Ammonites. So much so that as they scatter, there is no two of them left together. That's a statement on saying they didn't get to just like scatter together and then, huddle together and await the storm to be over. No, they are so depleted, so dominated, that if you're still alive, you're out there on your own. And this is the first statement of Saul. I'm king. I will not let this happen. And it becomes not only a message to all of the countries around them, but it also becomes a message to the people of Israel. This man will stand up for us. He will protect us. So let's go back into patriarchal culture again. What is the role of the patriarch? Head of the family, what do they bring? Protection, provisions, and value. And that's the role of the king, the chief patriarch. He's going to give us provisions. He's going to give our nation value. And above all, he's going to give protection to us. That's sort of the exchange that the people have with the king. It's the idea that all of this land is yours, but we will work for you to support you if you protect us. And he is able to show right here and now, at the very beginning of his kingdom, I'm going to be able to accomplish the task. You got to imagine Saul, who was hiding in the luggage last week, now has a new confidence. And I think there's two things that bring that. Not only success in battle, but I do think that the filling of the Holy Spirit is pretty significant here. What has been said is that a king is not necessarily the worst thing in the world to God. He didn't think they needed it. I'm the king, God says. But what we find is a king that relies on God is most necessary. And as of now, he's doing that. Yeah, Lynn? Interesting that he's plowing in his fields. Like if he's king, he shouldn't have to work. Yeah. But remember, he hasn't been completely and totally confirmed and established as king. You remember at the end of last week's lesson, we read in that last chapter, there was a group of people who are troublemakers, or y'all had different words. Scoundrels. How can this fellow save us? And they despised him and brought him no gifts. He still doesn't have the fullness of the kingdom that stood up with him. Now, let's look at this next section, and then we're going to dive deep into chapter 12. Starting in verse 12 there. The people then said to Samuel, "Who was it that asked, 'Shall Saul reign over us? Bring these men to us, and we will put them to death.'" Did they say that right after the people said that in chapter 11? No. They say it now that Saul's been faithful. Oh, he's going to do what he said he would do. And so now we stand behind him utterly and completely. But Saul said, "No one shall be put to death today, for this day the Lord has rescued Israel." He's giving credit to the Lord, Yahweh. He's not taking credit himself. And he sees the next step forward is not one of killing people, but of peace. Then Samuel said to the people, "Come, let us go to Gilgal, and there reaffirm the kingship." So all the people went to Gilgal and confirmed Saul as king in the presence of the Lord. There they sacrificed fellowship offerings before the Lord, and Saul and all of the Israelites held a great celebration. This is just a nice little bow on the story of Saul's confirmation as king. Now he was tested, he met the test, he passed the test, and now he has the support of all of the people. And he's making a strategic decision here. I'm not going to kill the naysayers, because now I have spared them. They will either give their lives to me, or they will owe me, and maybe a little bit of both. And so he's playing a political game, and he has now set himself up to be successful as king. All right, any final thoughts about that before we move into chapter 12? Okay, that was a quick dive there because I really want to dig in here in chapter 12. this is Samuel's farewell speech, okay? So when I hear that, I'm like, oh, what is he going to say? You know, did you guys all see Hamilton? You know, one of the most powerful moments is George Washington's farewell address. These, you know, you're leaving and you've been an honored leader. Everybody wants to know what you're going to say. Okay, and here's what he says. Samuel said to all of Israel, I have listened to everything you said to me and have set a king over you. Now you have a king as your leader. As for me, I am old and gray, and my sons are here with you. I have been your leader from my youth until this day. Here I stand. Testify against me in the presence of the Lord and his anointed. Whose ox have I taken? Whose donkey have I taken? Whom have I cheated? Whom have I oppressed? From whose hand have I accepted a bribe to make me shut my eyes? If I have done any of these, I will make it right. You have not cheated or oppressed us, they replied. You have not taken anything from anyone's hand. And Samuel said to them, the Lord is witness against you, and also his anointed is witness this day, that you have not found anything in my hand. He is witness, they said. Then Samuel said to the people, it is the Lord who appointed Moses and Aaron and brought your forefathers up out of Egypt. Now then, stand here, because I am going to confront you with evidence before the Lord as to all the righteous acts performed by the Lord for you and your fathers. After Jacob entered Egypt, they cried to the Lord for help, and the Lord sent Moses and Aaron, who brought your forefathers out of Egypt and settled them in this place. But they forgot the Lord their God. So he sold them into the hand of Sisera, the commander of the army of Hazor, and into the hands of the Philistines and the king of Moab, who fought against them. They cried out to the Lord and said, we have sinned, we have forsaken the Lord and served the Baals and the Ashtoreths. But now deliver us from the hands of our enemies, and we will serve you. Then the Lord sent Jerub-Baal, Barak, Jephthah, and Samuel, and he delivered you from the hands of your enemies on every side, so that you lived securely. But when you saw that Nahash, the king of the Ammonites, was moving against you, you said to me, no, we want a king to rule over us. Even though the Lord your God was your king, now here is the king. You have chosen here's the king you have chosen, the one you asked for. See, the Lord has set a king over you. If you fear the Lord and serve and obey him and do not rebel against his commands, and if both you and the king who reigns over you follow the Lord your God, good. But if you do not obey the Lord, and if you rebel against his commands, his hand will be against you as it was against your fathers. Now then, stand still and see this great thing the Lord is about to do before your eyes. Is it not wheat harvest now? I will call upon the Lord to send thunder and rain, and you will realize what an evil thing you did in the eyes of the Lord when you asked for a king. Then Samuel called upon the Lord, and that same day the Lord sent thunder and rain. So all the people stood in awe of the Lord and of Samuel. Then the people all said to Samuel, pray to the Lord your God for your servants, so that we will not die. For we have added to all of our other sins the evil of asking for a king. Do not be afraid, Samuel replied. You have done all this evil, yet do not turn away from the Lord, but serve the Lord with all your heart. Do not turn away after useless idols. They can do you no good, nor can they rescue you, because they are useless. For the sake of his great name, the Lord will not reject his people, because the Lord was pleased to make you his own. As for me, Far be it from me that I should sin against the Lord by failing to pray for you. And I will teach you the way that is good and right. Be sure to fear the Lord and serve Him faithfully with all your heart. Consider what great things He has done for you. Yet if you persist in doing evil, both you and your king will be swept away. All right, that was a lot. What is it that you're noticing, though? We have a lot of repetition. I'm just going to say that right here. There's a lot of repetition. So what are some of the things that you're seeing? Deanne. Yeah, he's still fussing at them for wanting a king, even though it's already a done deal. He's just kind of reminding them this wasn't a great choice. Yeah. Okay. He's been king. Oh, he's been judge for a while. Yeah, because he says now I am old and gray. Okay. What else? Yeah. So at the very beginning there, he says, I really appreciate how he says it. Here I stand. I get the picture of him going like this. Here I am. Tell me everything you need to bring against me. What are the sins that I have committed against you? Is there anything that you have against me, is what he's saying. And he asks these questions. Have I taken any of your oxen? Have I taken any of your donkeys? Any of these kinds of things. There's this kind of call response. Now the people say back to him, you've done nothing. You've been honorable. And then now he says, okay, now I'm going to tell you some things. Okay, what else? Yeah, he challenges them to continue following the Lord. Get into some of the details. What are you noticing? He's got some names that he mentions there. Go through that list. Yeah, they're judges. These are all judges. I named a couple of them from the NIV, and I also have footnotes, but Jerubbaal, do you remember who he is? It's Gideon. You have a note, maybe a footnote, or maybe they just named him as Gideon. In Judges, he's given both of those names, Gideon and Jerubbaal. And then also there's Barak, who also may be called Badon. But actually, we know him as Barak in Judges. Okay, what else are you noticing? Yeah, so he calls for the Lord to bring rain and lightning. But why does that? Let's just notice some other things about that. What does he say? It's during the wheat harvest. And when do you harvest? Not when it's raining. That's when things grow. But when it's dry. And so this is a very dry period, and he's calling for rain and thunder. Yeah, Lynn? Yes. Oh, okay. Yeah, he's even noting that he's selected the king ahead of his own sons. Not ahead of meaning in chronological order, but ahead of meaning with more priority. Yeah. Keith? Yes. Yeah, so he is dipping back in history to tell the story of people relying on God, but he brings up the Judges because he's also telling the story of when people forgot about God. And this is a common theme throughout all of Scripture, isn't it? We find it primarily in the Psalms, but the idea of retelling the story so that we can recognize God's faithfulness, but sometimes it also includes recognizing our unfaithfulness. You know, and how God still actually meets us in our unfaithfulness. Or, you've heard me say this before, A quick summary of the Old Testament from God's perspective is him saying, remember. And a quick summary from our perspective is, we forget. That's a good summary of the whole Old Testament. All right, what else are you noticing? Yes.
Not be afraid, Satan replied, you have done all this evil. Do not turn away from the Lord. Serve the Lord with all your heart. Even though you sin, keep serving the Lord.
Yeah, so Jim's just noticing there in verse 20, it's like, don't be afraid. Even though you've done all of this evil, don't turn away from the Lord, but serve him with all your heart. And then I really appreciate... Oh, yeah, Lynn, go ahead. Yeah, well, all right, well, let me pause you right there because we're interpreting. But as we're observing, we'll come back to that. But there is a lot of this repetition of reminding them of their sin, absolutely. I appreciate there in verse 23, as for me, far be it from me that I should sin against the Lord by failing to pray for you. We'll come back to that, but I have that underlined and starred in my Bible. I just appreciate him saying that. All right, David, what were you going to say?
Exactly that.
Oh.
He says he will, despite you doing what I didn't think was right,
Right.
I'm
going to pray for you. And he's connecting that prayer, seemingly, with his praying for the people is an act of faithfulness to God. Yeah. Okay, now let's just kind of look at this passage a little bit. Remember the importance of repetition. And think about how much is being repeated here. It's the same trend. We'll find it, like we're in, we just read Psalm 88 and Morning Watch a few days ago. Now we're in Psalm 89. There's a little bit of this going on in Psalm 89. It's all throughout the Psalms, but the idea is saying, look, okay, I'm going to stand before you. He says, first of all, I need to stand before you, and I need you to confirm. I'm not just going to assume that you can trust my words. And here's what he says. The reason you can trust me is because I have never leveraged my authority or power over you to gain something for myself. That's in essence what he said. I've not taken anything from you with my hand. And the reason he's saying that is, it would have been a very common practice. It still is a common practice for those who are in power to utilize their power to gain something from you for themselves. And so a normal practice would be, as he said, and did not close my eyes, I think was the way it said there. From whose hand have I accepted a bribe to make me shut my eyes? What that means is, I would say, I will not look at your sin or your whatever you're doing. If you give me enough money, I'll just ignore it, and no one will ever know about it. And if someone is a judge and they're doing that, they're not trustworthy, are they? Not trustworthy. And so he's saying, I have been honorable. This whole thing has been about the Lord, our God, and his kingdom and his love for you. And I've served you. And in essence, what I believe he's saying is, you had every reason to trust me, and you had every reason to trust God, but you still wanted the king. Now, excuse me, take a look at this one thing that we forgot to notice. Did you notice the timing of why they asked for a king in verse 12? Now, when you saw that Nahash, the king of the Ammonites, was moving against you, then you said to me, no, we want a king to rule over us. When we go back to chapter 8, we did not know that Nahash was moving against them. They just asked for the king, didn't they? We want to be like other nations. We don't even know that Nahash is moving against them until chapter 11. I wonder if this is just giving us a picture of how quickly armies move against other nations. Do you remember when Russia, before they actually invaded Ukraine, how long they sat on the border, and everyone's going, they're about to invade Ukraine. And they were like, no, we're not going to invade Ukraine. This is just some exercises. And that went on for a long time, didn't it? And this is modern warfare. Think about an army that can only move at the speed of walking. That's a long period of time. And we're getting a glimpse that the pressure of another nation coming against them is maybe the beginning of them wanting another king. And so Samuel's bringing that up. And he's saying, in essence, you didn't trust the Lord to protect you, even though he's done it over and over and over again. And so he just names all the times. Here's all the times it's happened. Boom, 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 boom. He's on this repeat so that he can make a really solid point. Nellie? Yes, that's right. And so that's another piece of the thing. Okay, look, here's all the reasons why you should not have asked for a king. So we're still, what did you say? What did you say? Nagging them? Fussing, sorry. As a mother would do, yes. He's still fussing because he's trying to help them understand, who is it that you will trust? He's just trying to remind them, even though you have a king, it's still the Lord. You have to trust him. And so now the second, or the other thing that he's on repeat in, it doesn't matter now what you've done. What's done is done. But pay attention to the Lord. And if you don't, it won't go well with you. But if you do, the Lord will be with you and all will be well. And he's on repeat with that idea too. Stay focused on the Lord. Stay focused on the Lord. And then his final statement there is, look, it may sound like I'm complaining against you and I don't want to be around you. And probably if you asked him, he'd probably say, and that's true. I don't, but really what he's saying is, this may sound like I'm pummeling you and I'm not behind you, but far be it from me. Far be it from me that I should sin against the Lord by failing to pray for you. He knows his role. He still loves his people. And even though he's frustrated with them, he's still standing in the gap for them. That's his commitment. Not to the people. It's his commitment to the Lord. How many times, I'm just going to make some application here. How many times is it that we will do something that goes against our culture or against what everyone says is common sense or against how we feel so that we would be faithful to the Lord? Love your neighbor and pray for those who persecute you. Or love your enemy, and pray for those who persecute you. And we would say, I'm not going to pray for them. They were jerks to me. But we don't do it for them. We do it for the Lord who calls us to do it for them. Treat others the way you want to be treated. But they didn't treat me well, so I'm not going to treat them kindly. You're not doing it for them. You're doing it for the Lord. Forgive 70 times 7, Well, what they did was awful. I'm not going to do that for them. You're not doing it for them. You're doing it for the Lord. And this is where Samuel is here. This is a huge statement for us because we're in a very divided place in our world. And this is the kind of thing that we're choosing for the sake of the Lord to love our neighbors. And not love them with a backhanded, but still I totally disagree with you kind of thing. The kind of love that says, you know what? I may disagree with you, but I love you and you may, and I'm going to treat you like I love you. This is massive stuff. And I'm really, really grateful for him saying this. Far be it from me that I should sin against the Lord by failing to pray for you. Okay, what thoughts do you have about that? Yeah, Deanne? The second half of that verse that we said? Yeah. And I will teach you the way that is good and right.
He wants to stay active
Yeah, in their lives, yeah. That's a really helpful reminder to me that one of the things I wanted to say to you was, when you read that this was Samuel's farewell speech, or when I first read it, my first thought was, oh, he's about to die. Right? I mean, that was the thing. Like, oh, he's about to die. But he's not going to die. He won't die till we get into 2 Samuel. Right? Isn't it 2 Samuel? Yeah. He's not dying. He's leaving his role as judge. He is handing over leadership here. And, I mean, can you imagine the emotion and the weight of what he's doing here? So, think about now all that he has said from the standpoint of he will now no longer speak publicly again. He's got to say everything that's on his mind. That's why the repetition. It's also why he stands in front of them and says, now it's your time to judge me. Make sure that I have done nothing wrong so I can make amends. And they bless him by saying, you've done nothing wrong. Andrea?
I admire Samuel's willingness to step into a different role. You know, there's times in our lives where we have different seasons, and we want to hang on to that season when really the Lord's saying, I have a new role for you.
Yeah.
And I can't give it to you. You're going to try to hang on
Yeah.
to the old role.
I'm going to summarize that for everybody so they could hear and correct me where I get it wrong, but I really appreciate you saying this. In essence, it's just a reminder for us. You know, Samuel was willing to take on another role because of what's happening. And she said, you know, so often, sometimes we're clinging to these roles because it's just what we know. It's because it's what we like. You know, there's a lot to it. But that can end up clogging up not only God's plan, but the ability to pass this on from generation to generation. I actually used to preach a sermon when I was on campus about Moses handing over leadership to Joshua. Churches would invite me in to preach as campus minister, and I had the, you know, when you're not the preacher there, you can preach something and then leave. And so, so I would say to them, you know, let's read this passage. And one of the things that we notice in that passage is that Joshua is totally different than Moses. And yet, he is the one God had ordained to lead Israel. And Moses willingly hands over leadership. He stands there with him, and it actually says he took his authority, his anointing, and he gave it to Joshua in front of everyone. That's massive. And if we don't have that as a part of the way we operate as a church, we will have a generation of people who are leaders until they die, and they've done nothing to train or equip or empower the next generation, and the church is dead. And so it's our job to develop leaders behind us so that we can pass it on from generation to generation. And that sounds romantic and poetic, but there is always a difficult period when we actually have to hand over the keys. It can be painful because it's been our identity sometimes. And this is a moment that we're watching Samuel actually do that. Terry Frick says, can you have that conversation with Jerry Jones? He won't listen. Yeah. Pam? We're in full interpretation mode, so have at it. Yeah, I think you're identifying that really well. This would be particularly difficult for him because it's legitimately been the only life he has known from very early on. I mean, can you imagine? Well, I remember reading George W. Bush's book, Decision Points. And one of the things he says at the beginning there, he talks a little bit about how different it was the first few days after he was not president. And he picks up the phone and there's a dial tone. You know, there wasn't somebody else on the other end. Or like when you walk into a room and you're in a position of authority like this, and everyone reacts to you differently. But then when all of a sudden you're not in that role, you know, it's a different reaction. And so if you've had that your whole life, I think you're right on. This had to have been difficult for him. Not only to mention the question of what is my purpose now. I'm not going to ask for hands. But I have ministered to a lot of you and a lot of people who after, let's say, retirement or even after different phases of their life have ended, the question becomes, what's my purpose now? It's a great question. And it's a difficult one to deal with. And it's one to take into prayer to the Lord. But it's no doubt Samuel's dealing with that type of thing. Absolutely. Any other thoughts? Jim? You get the final word. So Jim's asking, does he mention Saul in that final speech? And he does not mention him by name, but he does mention him by role as king. Do you have a question within that? Your mind is spinning. I can watch it. Right. Oh, almost as if he doesn't want to name him because he's kind of against it. Yeah, that's an interesting perspective. I think it's very valid. He certainly is still, as we've noted multiple times, he's still dealing with his own frustration and potentially resentment at the fact that they actually wanted a king, you know. So this is certainly a massive transition point for the nation of Israel. As I told you when we were studying 1 Samuel 8, when they asked for the king, this is a massive shift in who the people of God will be for the entire history of their nation. It's a king, and that's never been that way before. Okay, so next week we're going to pick up there in chapter 13. Now, let's just take note, because you can see the subtitle there, Samuel rebukes Saul, and he's just been confirmed. So it wasn't very long until we end up having problems. So, okay, let me say a prayer, and then we'll get, there's banana pudding in the other room. Yeah. That's all there is, banana pudding. Okay, let's go to prayer. Lord, we honor you, and we don't want to be distracted either. We want to remember, you are our Lord, our King, and we look to you. Help us to not forget it. Help us to not be distracted by anything else. Capture our attention, Lord, and help us to live our lives in ways that honor you. We offer this to you in your holy name. Amen.